For those of you still interested in matters literary, just before we started, I was handed a note. It's a bulletin. It says, the good news, Milton lives. The bad news, he's still writing. Now you watch the pro-early Renaissance society is going to write me. Don't write me. You can read Milton all you want to. I thought tonight, for the benefit of many of you vaudeville buffs, that we would pay some homage. I knew there were some here. We'd pay some homage to several of those great dance teams. First one that comes to mind is that great team of conversation and continuity. I knew they had a lot of fans left. And consider that if for no other reason, if there was nothing else afoot having to do with human speech, it would, if for no other reason, it would be supporting and supplying the necessary energy to run the secondary world and to keep the continuity going. Now, if you tried to drag your attention away from any, whatever might be the possible individual significance of speech, consider that it is a kind of ceaseless and determinable but beautiful babble that is right at the heart of the transformation and the transfer of the energies that make the secondary world of man grow. And this growth, one of the, as we've been mentioning, one of the primary aspects, one of the easy characteristics of the secondary world and growth and evolution. Calling it that from a three-dimensional view is not undeserved, but that's not the final word, but still all of these ideas that men have due to the complex nature of human life, of the debates of whether things are going downhill, uphill, whether we're progressing, whether we're de-evolving. Don't write me. If you can just look at it on the basis of continuity, because when continuity by any reasonable observation ceases, then you have got cause to be concerned. The continuity, by anybody's definition, the continuity if we took nation X, and it's just going along at some time in the past, let's say, which is the easiest to talk about because you can hold out your hand and talk about the past. Say. In the future, you have to do things like, but the past, you just go, it's a lot easier. And let's say sometime in the past, we have this nation, it's just going along. And inside that nation, as in inside of people, inside of cars, there is the diversion, the variety of, I guess they would have called it opinion, that is characteristic of a polarized living world, that even those people were just debating at the time, is our society progressing? Is our civilization going uphill? Are we falling apart? Are we replaying the rise and fall of the Roman Empire? Are we replaying the presentation and then the quick cancellation of my mother the car? You do not have to fall into any debate as to whether things are actually going up or down, because from any polarized view, as you should know by now, from any ordinary view of anything going on in life, you can end up with what? Mixed views. Because you could look back at history or you can look right now and say, well, the area in which I live, there is much to be said. The arts are flourishing. My particular area of vocation, the pay is increasing. But on the other hand, robbery in my neighborhood, crime is up. And so you end up with mixed feelings. If someone asks you, what do you think, is life going up or down? You can forget all of that if you can see in a certain way if there is a continuity, because the other, of course, is part of the variety, the necessary variety that keeps life alive. And so you're always going to have people in the midst. In the Garden of Eden, if you don't remember, it was Adam's brother-in-law, Herman, that said, Adam and Eve walking around thinking, how could things be better? As soon as you let an in-law in, he began complaining. And so you have always got that. Even at paradise on earth, somebody's going to be complaining if the place is alive. So there's no way to stand back and expect from any ordinary view that if indeed utopia, if Brother Moore dumped it upon us, if suddenly we had heaven on earth, if you expected that would be the cessation of diverse opinions, or that would stop somebody somewhere from whining, bitching, that if indeed Chicken Little would finally grow up, you're wrong. Because if that happened, instead of it being the Garden of Eden, what you would have is you'd look away and you'd look back and the garden would have shriveled. It would have all died, and you along with it, because you would have no nourishment. Back to the main course. So rather than there being any possible interest in a future potential that everyone will become of a like mind, whichever it was, that the whole society, the whole group anywhere, the whole collection of DNA, the whole collection of humans at any given area would all holler, yes, on the bigger and better. Or if they all go, well, we've had it. It's not going to happen unless the latter was actually true. And then it would have happened before anybody knew it. So rather than having any interest, back to the main subject, having any concern over diverse opinions and whether some experts will say, well, things are not progressing, because all you got to do is change channels, and they got an expert that's going to say, things are really looking up. Look at it this way. Continuity. So back to our fictitious Nation X at some time, some civilization. Rather than looking back historically, or trying to look contemporaneously, and say, that is, your brain goes ring, and you say hello, and your brain says, it's hard to actually determine to a certainty whether that society, had I been alive then, and the keen observer that I am now, whether even I would have realized that the pillars, the underpinnings of that great Roman civilization were actually faulty. I'm not sure I would have known, and I look now, and I think I live in the best of all possible worlds, but I'm not sure. Will it continue like this, or are some of the critics correct? Is it all about to collapse? Is our society rotten to the core? Is life about to die on us? If it was a form of continuity from any reasonable opinion at any time, then everything's all right. Because contrary, if you can see, what seems to be the unexpected, not natural catastrophes, but the kinds of human catastrophes that seem to happen. Wars is the great one. The rest of them are just kind of warm-ups. Wars. Or sometimes financial catastrophes. They are, in a sense, catastrophes historically, contemporaneously, on the basis that they do what? Not just kill a lot of people, because that's no big deal to life. Not just because a lot of people go broke. What does life care? You're not going anywhere. They can't repossess life. Another way to look at it is what happens is continuity is interrupted. That, from a more complex view, is the catastrophe. Not the war, but the continuity. Do you understand? It doesn't matter what. I call it Nation X. It doesn't matter what. Whatever they were doing, whoever they were, whatever their religion was, whatever their race was, whatever would be a thumbnail sketch of their culture, it doesn't matter. If they were just, as the philosophers in Alabama used to call it, tootling along. Just put, going right along. There was a certain kind of continuity. Then there's nothing to say. There is no cause for alarm. The catastrophe is not that one of their neighbors suddenly attacked them. Their catastrophe is not that internally in some way there Wall Street collapse. The catastrophe, that may be the three-dimensional observation that, well, things were doing pretty good until their unruly neighbors attacked them and just destroyed. I mean, they wiped out their major cities. They killed the king. They killed the religious leaders. It was a horrible, horrible epoch in their history. That's a good, you can find that in a three-dimensional history book. The catastrophe, though, from a more complex view, was that whatever the continuity was, and it doesn't matter what it was, the continuity of things going right along, it being interrupted, that is the catastrophe. That would be the heartbreak if indeed the team of conversation and continuity ever broke up. I guess it would be safe that some of you had already forgotten that I started out with a team of conversation and continuity. We'll save it. That is, salvage it. The continuity, in a secondary sense, and you understand me doing all this and talking about whatever the nation or group was that the continuity was going along, it is a secondary continuity because there is no reasonable, no proper way to talk about a primary continuity. If people are alive, if this planet is alive, if the biosphere is alive, then at the primary level, continuity is taking place. That's all you've got to say. There is no profitable way. There's nothing worthwhile to go into any sort of discussion about what would be a primary form of continuity. If you're breathing, and if you're around other humans that are breathing, if the planet is still breathing, then that's it. Anything else is just flapping your gums for no particular reason. So the continuity is at the secondary level. And the continuity could not exist without human speech. There would be no secondary world without human speech. So consider that there is the little thing I said about the incessant babbling. I know that all of you can fill in your own more manifold jokes, that was sort of a satire on top of a satire, that if we were taking it at an ordinary level, at face value, it would sound as though it were some cynical attack on humanity that, well, ordinary society and everything is just people babbling. That's true from one view, but it is not any form of criticism because the babble is beautiful, because the babble is the sound of the secondary world growing. That's not the only sound. But if that sound ceased, you would have an interruption. And if the interruption was big enough, I think it's Freddie and the Dreamers said, or somebody, if a kind of hush or the Bee Gees fell all over the world, not just over in Nation X. I mean, that we can survive over in Nation Y. But if a kind of hush fell all over the world for too long, I guess it could all coincide that there was kind of a hush there for a few seconds. But if you go outside and there's a kind of a hush that fell all over the world, don't even bother to chase down Freddie and the Dreamers or who it was and try to get even with them. It's all over. You can kiss your socks goodbye, because if that sound ceases, the secondary world of man is done for. So the Bible, the little five-dimensional humor, the Bible is actually beautiful because it is the normal sound of the secondary world growing. Another way, one more little quick, some of these get so crude that some of you should begin to enjoy them because it's a form of, or it's an attempt to help you, make you think more directly, because the kind of abrupt interruption of continuity to apparent things out here, like the Roman Empire, any group, when the continuity ceases, what is one of the things that happen? A lot of silence. But see, the crudeness now, if I was going, I'll do it again, play ordinary intelligence part, I could go, what in the hell did that mean? And if I said, well, just consider something, let's take the example of one of the most common, warfare. For whatever reason, we're not going into that, it's just the movement of the three-dimensional world based on polarized transformations of energy, that this one group, Nation Y, suddenly comes in. We're talking about, we're using Nation X as our example, that they were in the midst of an ordinary run of continuity. and nationwide attacks them. I mean, bad. Beats them. The continuity of Nation X is now severely interrupted. What would be, I'm still talking to ordinary intelligence, what would be one of the characteristics of being really interrupted, really defeated? And ordinary intelligence says, well, I heard what you said. You said a great deal of silence. Yeah? Well, that's silly. Well, now think about it. And then ordinary intelligence can say, well, wait a minute. If you're talking about, let's take maybe out just on a great battlefield. Okay? And nationwide comes down, it's like the final battle, the final skirmish of the war. And they wipe out most of the good young men, and nowadays women, I'd assume, be out there doing their share. And nationwide, just for all intents and purposes, obliterates the heart, the young, the growing men and women of Nation X. A kind of hush falls over the battlefield. The victors go on back home. They're not all that enthused normally. You get close to a primary level of being out there up to your knees and, or at least ankles in blood. So they go wandering on back home, and you're left there with Nation X, most of them dead. And so ordinary intelligence could say, all right, I guess it would get quiet. But that's not much of a philosophical or allegorical or metaphorical or symbolic statement, is it? It would probably be true, would it not? And ordinary intelligence say, yeah, but so what? Nobody likes the crudeness. Nobody likes the fact that life is writing all your material. If you can plug in to be able to think directly, it's all right there. But wait a minute. That doesn't even qualify as good metaphor. Not to ordinary people who are tied up into the continuity of ordinary metaphors. But silence, a lack, or if you prefer to start with, to put on your little jammies and muffins on your hands while it's cold, a diminution of talk would be a characteristic of a severe break in continuity. You don't like that? Not the hell with Nation X. What happens when you get sick? I'm so much sick. Not you people that have these imaginary things you build up in your mind being a hypochondriac, building up illnesses in your brain. But you're actually sick. You got the flu. So you're sick down at the primary level, and it drains out energy from the secondary level. What happens when you are actually sick? What's one of the first things that happens? Besides whining and wanting to call your mother, but what's one of the first things that happens? Almost before you even think to lay down, is you begin to fall silent. It is an interruption in what normally seems to be, I'll use ordinary terminology, your personality, your sense of apparent individuality. Everybody knows that. I mean, it's just as obvious as saying, well, if a group of people get defeated, yeah, they're going to be quiet. Most of them are dead. Boy, big deal. What kind of damn crummy symbolism or metaphor is that? See? Of course, those same people are going to miss this because they say, well, everybody knows you get sick. You don't feel like talking. I mean, you're not the life of the party. It begins the drain on the secondary world. One of the first things it'll hit. I know that you'll want to lay down. You want to get in the easiest position. But other than that, about the first thing that happens that you can observe is there begins to be an increase in silence. You want to see it another way? When you are sick, to the point, and it doesn't take much, that you would agree, that you can observe or think back. When you think back, you can do that in your brain. Think back that, yes, when I get sick, when I get the flu, and I almost got the flu right now, you're right, and I didn't feel like talking much all day to people, and not mad, I just didn't feel like talking now that you mention it. All right, take it a bit further. How about this? The diminution of secondary interest and secondary energy. What is the possibility, now that you've got the flu, you're sitting at home, laying at home, comfortable, nothing to do, and let's say that you have been planning to go back and review some of your college chemistry. Or perhaps you're taking some classes at night. What is the chance of you laying there in bed, nothing to do, you're off work, you got sick leave coming, what's the chance of you laying there doing something intellectually? Now, you sure as hell can pick up a book and read it, but what's the chance of you laying there reading it when you feel bad enough that you're not talking as much as normal? The chance of you reading something and then, just in a crude sense, it actually making sense, registering, very small. Talk in the continuity of the secondary world, which is the continuity of the human intellect at the ordinary level, are an inseparable, we should hope, dance team. There is another dance team I wanted to hit that I know some of you would really, really be upset if I didn't mention. And that is the team of telling what kind of guy you are in continuity. I mean, a great precision team in their own right. Telling what kind of guy you are not only helps keep you the kind of guy you are, but taking over a wider range of everybody telling what kind of guy they are, it assures today's continuity into tomorrow. Because it's not just from a very crude view of keeping you who you are, keeping you sane, keeping you stable, keeping your personality, your apparent individuality that can be predicted, that there are certain expectations from your employers, people who know you, from your mirror, from your brain, that telling what kind of guy you are dances continually in a very precise manner with continuity. Because taking it this wider range that not just you now, but the whole city, everyone is involved, everyone is dancing with their own, let me tell you what kind of guy I am. This, over the wide range, or a wider range of the secondary world, of just ordinary collections of people, sometimes known around here as the city, assures that tomorrow will come. Not the primary tomorrow, but the secondary tomorrow. Because without continuity, there would be no secondary tomorrow. Primary tomorrow might be here. As they say, the sun might come up, but the sun might come up looking down upon the most progressed creatures on this planet then, perhaps being beavers, because it certainly wouldn't be men anymore. Part of that family act, we could expand it. As all of you real aficionados of vaudeville know, Borscht Belt know, family acts are a big deal, and they still are, in our hearts at least. Now, part of that family act from what kind of guy, telling what kind of guy you are in continuity, was an offshoot. And that was whining in continuity. See, I knew a lot of you would remember them. They're still around, as a matter of fact. Just the venues have changed. Whining in continuity is tied to something. I'm going to say it's tied to something that we were talking about earlier, still under the general auspices, you'll notice, of conversation and continuity is why I started out with them, because they are the ultimate, I think you'll all agree, dance team in this area. But in the whining and continuity, we're back to the ending of sentences with a whine. Which, I'll pause for a second. In fact, I'm going to need a drink of something here. And so everybody think, how common is ending sentences with whining? And maybe even wonder, am I going to say it's real common? Oh, there's something written in the bottom of it. It says, oh, it's a mislaid chiro. It says, it's very hard to talk without whining. No? Wait, it says, I hate to get off the subject. The beauty still of being a broadcaster being able to quote others, having somebody else write your material, or even worse, you writing your own material. If you can read the news, in the broadest sense of the word, you can almost not whine. Not in the ordinary sense, because it's not me talking. Or if you're an actor, the same thing. If I can speak someone else's lines, you can almost not whine. Real iffy. And of course, notice there are very few actors, very few anchor people reading the news. You may think there's a lot. Very few. Life only can tolerate a few people, even indirectly, not ending up primarily whining when you talk. The whining and continuity, the ending of sentences with a whine. Should we suspect, let's just say, since we don't have time, and certainly not the brain power to figure it out, let's just say that there would seem to be some instances in life where people seem to tend to end up their sentence with a kind of whine. You have to be able to hear it. You can't go looking for it on the basis that you're going out and bag some sort of sarcastic beaver. It's not something you're going to find and go, aha, I knew it. I knew people whined. See, because you end up with a beaver in your shorts yourself. You end up shooting yourself, not in the foot, but in the ass, which is all forms of criticism. So you can't go out looking on the basis that people do it. You just simply got to hear. And, of course, whine, that's not my word. I took that from the English vocabulary to represent what's going on. That's the best one they had, and it's fine with me if it's fine with you. Is it fine with you? Good. Well, don't whine about it. It's the best one I could find. But just listen. You're surrounded by it. And if you're not surrounded by it, listen. You are surrounding it because it's in here. So, got it either way. But to be able, the great dance team of whining and continuity, as long as you can end up a sentence with a kind of whine, as long as you can do that, what you're faced with, or what you're participating in then, is you're ending up, you're part of the conversation. And of course, if you're having a conversation, we'll assume it's with someone else, because we're not talking about those people at the fringes that talk to imaginary playmates. So if you're in a conversation, then you're dancing with someone. You're playing a song. The conversation is a kind of music. To end up your part, your temporary part, your sentence, to end up with a whine, looks at from sort of a jazzier view. To end up your sentence, your chorus, with a whine, we could say represents some of the most attractive pickup notes in jazz, that if you can end up making your sentence and you end up with kind of a whine at the end. No, contraire. It is. If we were going to jump right quick to it's not metaphorical, now it's symbolic, because it's true both ways, which is, as everyone likes to remind themselves, the difference. If we were now on a stage, and let's say the sax man, Joe Henderson takes the first one, and he gets through, and he ends up right then with a few whines. But let's say he went back and sort of restated the theme, or he did something that was enough, if it was, as they say, really close to true improvisation on his part right there at the end, the last couple of measures. And he threw in a few notes, and it was just enough, and the trumpet player comes in. Blue Mitchell, if he was still alive, but no matter. And he might grab those few notes and repeat them, then begin to build on that. He would take the pickup notes from the saxes that just got through with his sentence. His chorus. And he would pick them up and use it. Or as I said, perhaps this guy, whoever was playing the chorus right before him, even went back and grabbed the tail end if they were playing a song that had some recognizable melody, an old standard, but sort of repeating the theme. And so then the next guy can grab that. Does anybody think I've changed the subject much? You remember? Well, I guess you seeing that building burned down and knowing that your family could have been in there was a heartbreaking experience. That was a heartbreaking experience to be faced with that. Yes, you're right. It is some of the most attractive pickup notes. It's for the guy who played the chorus right before you to leave you something to grab hold of. And the greatest thing to grab hold of, I mean, you people already voted one of the outstanding teams is whining in continuity. So to keep the continuity going, you don't want to go, the band goes ahead and they plays whatever the theme was, and they do it, and then the saxophone player takes off and he plays a couple of choruses. And then he gets through, and you don't want this. Life doesn't want this. You wouldn't want to have been there and paid a $10 cover charge. And the saxophonist gets through, nice little couple of choruses, and you're inclined to go do-do-do. And suddenly the trumpet player starts to play, and he changes it from 2/4 into a waltz, changes the song completely, turns his horn inside out, blows through the bell of it. You know, we're not talking about some kind of Dada performing art. We're talking about you expected a certain continuity. The band started playing. They went 1, 2, don't. And there in the middle, suddenly somebody just fell apart. Conversations. Conversations are very important. It's not just people babbling. It's not just people trying to jump on the coattails of the interviewer or the other person and trying to grab their last few words they said, like, well, you're the expert, of course, Dr. So-and-so, but the kind of economic indicators that I was looking at, I believe, would give us some cause to be concerned. Of course, you're the expert. What do you say? Well, there's certainly some cause to be concerned, all right. I've seen some of those same figures, and of course I have access to some more, but there's certainly a reason to be concerned because I'm concerned. You know, not enough to put my ass on the line, but I'm concerned. Whining, the reality behind whining, not just the obvious, but if you begin to listen, the continuity that is necessary in human conversation, the dance is verbally going on, the passing of information, the plagiarism from one person to another. But remember, as Kyrie pointed out, there is a kind of way to look at the plagiarism in the secondary world, which is the intellectual moving of ideas of, well, based on what I saw, you're the expert, but it seemed to me that there's some basis to be concerned over the economy. Now to the other guy, he's dancing. He says, there is certainly some reason to be concerned about the economy. There's no doubt about that. In a sense, it's plagiarism, right? But in the city, it is growth because it is no longer theft as long as the thief seems to improve on it. Now that's why I let Kairoot say improve on it, improvise on it, rewrite it. Because Dr. So-and-so did not show up there. They did not invite him there to the studio for them to say, for some rinky-dink anchor person to say, well, according to the indicators I've seen, which they wouldn't know an indicator if it, got in their socks. They just say, but they know that without knowing it, they know that there's a continuity. They know that they're not going to say, well, Dr. So-and-so, according to the economic indicators I've seen, there's some reason to be concerned. They know if this is Greenspan, if it's the head of the President's Commission, they know that the guy's not going to say, where'd you go to school? What indicators you been looking at? Because they hadn't looked at any indicators, but of course, it's not people, it's life in operation as always. But this little reporter there, the indicators I've been looking at would lead me to believe, I'm not the expert, you are, that's why we invited you, but the indicators I've been looking at would lead me to say that there might be some reason to be concerned. The guy's not going to say, you hadn't looked at any indicators. Have you? Come on, admit it. And the person, well, you're right. That is not the dance. That is not the kind of continuity, as you know. I mean, you can get a cheap laugh out of it. And if you were still as sophomoric as a little kid and you to go, stick out your tongue at laugh, but you know that's not going to happen. But plus, from one view, you do know what I'm saying, that if you're trying to look at, as they call it in the city, if you're trying to be truthful, you surely do know, you probably never thought about it, but these people, they're all dressed up, and you find out they're getting $200,000 or $300,000 a year, but all they're doing is sitting there reading a piece of paper. They look good on camera, and they say, well, Dr. So-and-so, we're pleased to have you here. And the doctor's pleased to be there, and he knows who they are. They're making more money than he is. But the doctor knows from a kind of three-dimensional, if you want to take this view right quick, a kind of three-dimensional view, you got to know if this is the way the human system worked, which is not. After the fact, people talk about it, of course. John Milton, for instance. Jesus, boy, aren't you glad he... The doctor, he knows that this person doesn't keep up with economics. The person that says, well, according to the indicators I've seen, they surely know, from one view, that he doesn't believe I know that. If I knew that much, why did we invite him here? I could just said it. But life knows what it's doing. And if you think you got a choice that you're going to trip up life, Be sure and write me, by the way. I didn't mean to. Be sure and write me. Write me in care of General Motors, Dearborn, Michigan. The continuity, the dance must go on, but it's a kind of plagiarism that even the doctor, the expert in economics, back to my example, will still pick up the last few words. You understand? It's like the pickup notes of the trumpet player coming in to take his couple of courses of attempted improvisation, expressing himself. He comes in, but he will oftentimes grab the last few notes of the previous player. But instead of looking at it as being a multi-piece band, a sextet or whatnot, just look at it as being a two-person dance, which is always down to that. Even the expert will come in and plagiarize, when it's done good, will plagiarize the last few words of another person, even if the other person, in one view, didn't know what they were talking about. Like, well, it seemed to me there's some reason to be concerned. The expert says, well, there is some reason to be concerned. It is beautiful. You can look at it as being plagiarism. You can look at it as intellectual laziness. You can look at it as being somebody stalling for time. You can look at it as being babble. Like, well, you're an expert. Don't stand there and repeat what some... I happen to know that anchor person. They barely got through high school. They just look good and they can read. They took voice lessons and diction. But, PM, what the hell are you doing repeating what they said? Like, yes, you're correct, Mary. May I call you Mary? You are correct. It's very astute of you because there is some reason. I don't want to frighten it, but there is some reason to be concerned. You could look at it from one view and say, well, that's just a bunch of phooey. It's not. It's the healthy sound of a brook babbling. It's a secondary world chugging right along. But more specifically, where we were, in a way, if you can hear it, the more that the previous player, the more that the person with whom you're conversing and dancing, the more that they will end up a sentence where they kind of whine, the easier it is efficient for you to pick it up. And God forbid, I don't know why I would say this to you people, but if you do it, it's easier for them. Oh, I know that you would probably want to die before you would do that. But as long as you can end up with a kind of whine, it's easier for the other person. As far as the kind of interruptions in life, this is a real aside, and I'm not going into it because it's so shallow, there's so little, there's nothing to really go into. Think about the historic complaints that, what do some of you call yourselves? Children, yes, have against their parents. Boy, I hate to go see my mother because all she does is whine and stay on my ass. Your mother too? Yeah. Damn, I know what you mean. Ma, is that you? Of course, I'm exaggerating. But the reality behind the word whine, and even more what I intend, what life is up to, it is like a great open artery for energy. It's not a negative thing, as irritating as it can be to some sensitive ears, albeit. But it is like a great open line of energy. And it's just waiting that one person ends up their sentence. It's like, if you want to look at it from the dance view again, it's like you're talking to someone. When you're talking, you're leading, and they're dancing backwards and maybe do a little dip. But then you know it's about time because their breath's going to give out. You know that they can't think but about 10 words, so you know that they're in their sense. They're going to say something like, yeah, I went back home and my mother's still driving me nuts about when you're going to get married. And you know that it's the end of the sentence. And so you get ready. It's time. They're fixing to quit dancing forward. You do a small dip, and then you begin to dance forward, and they have to go backward. They have to listen. You change hands. But if it ends with this kind of whine, and it's not just auditory, it is greater than that. It's a kind of step. You can feel it coming. But they end kind of on a little thing. And what it does is help support continuity. You dance, And they don't just say something like, well, you know this, back to these kind of examples, is one person says, oh, I hate to go, it's the holidays, and I got to go see my mother, and she drives me nuts. Isn't that way with you? And so it's your turn. Right? And so you know, and they say, isn't it that way with you? And they try to dip you, and so it's going to be your turn. You get ready to change hands. You know this. You don't go, and they go, isn't it that way with you? And then it's your turn. You go, no. See, sometimes physical shtick, speaking of vaudeville, can be because that's exactly at another level what would happen. Is there dancing, you're both going along, and, da-da-da-da-da, and then you go da-da-da-da-da, you dance, you know how it goes, and they go da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, but if it went and somebody went da-da-da-da-da, isn't that way with you? And you went, no. It would be a break in the what? In the continuity. Again, I point out that it's not that hard, surely, to see the reality behind the words I was using about plain talk, plain speak, direct, and there's no demand for it. It's not even really acceptable because it would break up the continuity. Well, no. Yes, no, never mind, no. Whining. Whining is the true sound of city continuity. A word to the wise. It is. I can talk about Bible and other, but the true sound, just stand away. If you can stand away, of course, staying away out here is not going to help you a damn bit. But to be able to stand away, whining is the true sound, the comforting sound, the reassuring sound. It's the true sound over there of city continuity. We can at least hit one more team that I know I would surely be called on if I did not include, and that is the other great team of memory and continuity. God bless them. I mean, what a team! Just the memory of them will warm the cockles of your memory. For those of you that flew in, were able to get your cockles through the airport security. The rest of you just got to imagine what it would be like to have warm cockles, I guess. Or even memorable cockles. But I guess we better drop that. Cockles to remember. Cockles the likes of which we may never see again. There's a way in which you could look at memory. Of course, we're talking about human intellectual memory, which is only kind of memory that, again, is worthy of any profitable discussion because the primary world has its own memory, just as it has its own continuity and its own everything else. The rest of this is a kind of outgrowth, kind of reflections. But just to remind you, is we're speaking of intellectual memory, not the memory even as interconnected as it is, but not the memory of your body of being able to do something about looking, being able to drive and all that. We're talking about this kind of memory. You could see from one quite valid view that human memory is the supreme lead dancer. It is the terpsichorean stupor mundi of life structure for continuity. No offense intended to whining and general conversation, telling what kind of guy you are, but you got to give credit where credit's due. Nobody can step. Nobody can dance like memory. Once you get a fair view of the structure of secondary life that keeps continuity going, that keeps human civilization, that keeps humans as a singular creature extant and flourishing. Very specifically, what memory can do vis-a-vis its partner, remember we're talking about the dance team of memory and continuity, is memory. Memories can suddenly produce a sensation, an illusion, which is good as the same thing, as the real thing, as you would call it. But it can produce suddenly a sense of continuity where there was none. Where there was none. Let's get real close to the area where Bastard meets Robbins, right at the cutting edge of the city, where the primary meets the secondary. Not where the blue of the night meets the gold of the day. Take a place where continuity, getting close to the primary level, where there is an individual level, let's say, an abrupt interruption to continuity, such as a death in your family. A death of someone close. Now that, although it's, the reality of it, the ultimate reality is obviously a primary manifestation. But there you are, and you suddenly get a phone call, and you find that somebody, your immediate family, somebody died. Now the continuity, again, forgetting your life, or whether you were bitching, whether you were whining 5 seconds before, let's say that you're 2 or 3 decades old, you're part of the middle of the bell curve, ordinary Joe, Mary Smith, anywhere USA. And so there's a certain continuity, there you are, and suddenly you get a phone call, and you find that somebody, part of your immediate family, just died. Now that is a break in the continuity. Here, besides the primary aspect that the person is now dead at the 3-dimensional level, and the effect that it can have quite directly on your own genetic code. But in the secondary, you simply know there's no hocus pocus about it. It puts people into oftentimes shock. You're just staggered. And it's not just physical, because you're not hurt. You weren't in a wreck with somebody that killed them, but you just simply heard sound waves that came over this instrument, and those sound waves translate into your nervous system up here, that your mother just got killed. It interrupts the continuity of this. The only continuity, as I said, that it's profitable to speak of, the secondary continuity. But this break can be treated. And how? You can just suddenly, of course relative, but you can hang up the phone and somebody's there with you and says, "My God, what happened?" You said, "My mother just got killed." And so some period of time goes by, you go cry or you go do something, you go put water on your face. And it's not just shock. I know they call it that, and that's, they can try to deal with it at the city level. But I'm pointing out that the continuity of the secondary world in you, running through, has been severely interrupted. And it comes out and is called generally shock, but there you are, and you have to wander around. And let's say you're with somebody else. You're with a friend, and they say, "Are you all right?" And you go, "Well, wait a minute." And so you go in the bathroom, and you cry, or you throw up, or you put water on your face. So a little time passes, and it's really almost as though, literally, that you are just at loose ends. You have lost your moorings up here. The continuity has been severely interrupted. So let's say just after a little period of time, you go back in the room, and this other person, maybe they pour you a drink or a cup of coffee or something, you sit down. Memory can begin to treat it just almost instantly. And how? It produces continuity through memory, and it can do it almost immediately. The other person says a few words like, "Are you all right? Here, drink some of this." And maybe the other person says, "Well, was it an accident? Or, has she been sick or something?" You go, "No, it was a car wreck. She just suddenly got killed." And then you what? You will start talking. You will start dealing in memories about your mother. And what it does is it can instantly, of course it doesn't bring her back to life, obviously, not in the primary sense, but it will begin to treat in a meaningful way that may keep you from going bonkers, may keep you from actually passing out or going into some real degree of physical shock that you might need immediate physical attention. You start treating the interruption of continuity through memory, through talking. It doesn't matter what, you just begin to talk about your mother. You begin to have memories. You can be crying, you can be whining, you can do anything you want to, whatever might attend the memory. But memory can serve as an immediate, just sudden pickup of an interruption of continuity in a person's life. Think about it. And from some views, we can make it sound as though, and I have, to try to get you looking a certain way, of bad-mouthing ordinary memory, which we'll get back around to that. But I'm talking about at the city level, with ordinary people, memory is perhaps the supreme partner in the dance with continuity, because I tried to pick out as an extreme. That's probably it, example of that sort of thing. Or those of you who are a little more self-centered, you go in the doctor and the doctor gives you an examination, asks you to wait in another room, and he's gone 30 or 40 minutes, and he comes in, and he's got a half pint in his hand, and he looks a little, and he's got some x-rays and stuff, and he looks at you, and he hands you the bottle. All right, instead of somebody else dying, he tells you same sort of thing, not just shock, but it is an interruption in the continuity of you being you. What? He says, there's no doubt. I've checked it back and forth. I've called in other people. There's no doubt. You're going to be dead very shortly. There's nothing we can do. Same sort of treatment. Memory about yourself. It may not stop whatever the disease is any more than remembering your mother and talking about her, bring her back after she's dead. But you will begin to treat this severe, this incapacitating, this uncomfortable, this unprofitable, if it was on a large scale, but this unprofitable at the individual level, interruption of continuity in you, the unprofitable condition of this, to life. I mean, life, obviously, if the doctor is correct, life is about to extinct you. The doctor says, you got 4 to 6 weeks if you're lucky. So you're about to be yesterday's news. Life will get along. But right then, unless you're going to just completely crack up, which is just life, put you out 4 to 6 weeks early. But assuming you're going to live out that time, what will you do once you go the initial shock? You'll begin to have your own memories about you. And what it does, it will immediately, as soon as you get over the initial shock, the same way you parallel to your finding about the death of somebody in your family, the death of someone else, as soon as you go over the initial shock, what will you start doing? And the doctor says, he gives you a drink or something, says, are you all right? So after a few minutes, let's say, I can almost make it up for you. What would people start doing? Once you sort of get that shock, you go, well, that's weird. I remember when my father, he died of cancer. But I remember when he came home. Or, this is weird. I certainly don't want to die, but I've just been talking to my wife that I need to take off time, and we were just about to. I've worked so hard these last few years. It's the memories. It is you. It is your own nervous system talking to you. It's your own partnership talking to you. That is life, running energy still, that you're alive. And it takes what ordinary people call memory, and it will suddenly produce and help support, help realign, help refinance a continuity in you here that was just absolutely gone. There's just the point that you were almost physically, and of course here, incapacitated, in shock. And memory is just an immediate treatment. Well, we ran out of time. I was really going to badmouth memory, as I guess you assume. So I guess we'll have to wait till next time, but it makes it kind of a ironic, abrupt interruption, doesn't it? If I just left instead of saying just what I'm saying now, but if I'd left it kind of on that note to where we just cut it off and everybody was, most of you were sort of pensive and Everybody deserves their due, right? So, we spoke kindly of memory. But I'm going to tell you what. Next time we meet, you wait to hear what I've got to say. If I don't, well, if somebody remind me, if I don't forget to pick it up right here, would somebody make a note so I could remember to